Good morning, church family. I miss seeing all of your smiling faces, but I am glad for this opportunity I have right now to share with you and to encourage you this morning. Last fall, our teaching team got together like we usually do to plan the sermon series and messages for the next year, for 2020. And while we were together, we came up with this idea to do a series called Uncluttered, because we were very aware in our own lives, but also in our society, in our culture, in our church family, that our lives really felt cluttered. There was a lot of busyness cluttering our lives. There was competing priorities that we're dealing with. So we thought it would really be great just to take some time to talk about that together as a church family, to reorient our lives again, to discern how to and what to say yes to and what to say no to discern between what is really necessary and what isn't necessary, what is urgent and what is truly important. What is the best out of all the good things that we're involved in? What are the best things that we need to hold on to? We felt God encouraging us to rediscover that pure and holy passion that He created us for. I like what the writer says in Hebrews 12. He says, throw off everything that hinders you so that you can run the race that has been marked out for you. God has marked out a race for us, a life for us to live, a purpose for us to complete, but there's things that crowd in and just begin to clutter our lives and slow down that race or distract us from that race that God has for us. We also felt that there was a need for us to unclutter and to do this message series because of the increased anxiety that is in our lives. The anxiety that comes just from the fast pace that we're in, the endless activity that seems to crowd our schedules. And what happens, it begins to create this underlying anxiety and restlessness. And we were feeling all of that when we were together last fall and talking about this. So we decided to do this series, and then we said, where are we going to fit it into the calendar? And we came up with the plan to do this series in April and May of 2020. Does God have a sense of humor or a sense of really caring for us? He knew what was happening and going to be happening in our lives right now, April, May 2020. And so this message about anxiety and uncluttering our lives just becomes really pertinent right now for all of us. I know some of you are like me, or maybe busier than ever, but there is this sense of some of the clutter of all the extracurricular things in our lives has just been set to the side for now. And this is a good time to decide what of all those things, what was really important, what do we want to bring back into our lives? How do we keep our lives uncluttered? How do we live our lives free of anxiety? God's wanting to restore our souls in this season. God's wanting us to pay attention to what's going on inside of us. John Ortberg, in his book Soul Keeping, says this. He says, when we're too busy, our souls begin to shrivel. I think there's this sense in our society and maybe in our lives of soul fatigue, that our soul is just fatigued with all the busyness that we've been involved in over the past number of years. When endless busyness, anxiety, fear, weariness, and depression begin to sweep over you, you begin to feel those emotions. It's time to stop. It's time to stop and take care of your soul. This morning, I want to talk to you about how to deal with anxiety that you may be experiencing in your life right now. Anxiety is common to most people. It's a common emotion that when things are going on in our lives, we tend to get anxious about it because it's the unknown. We're not sure what's going to happen or how we're going to handle that. And especially in this season right now, we're in a season of isolation. We're in a season of disruption, major disruptions going on, and in a season of uncertainty. We're really not sure what's going to happen next week, the next 2 weeks. How's it all going to pan out? We don't know. So I just want to say this. If you're dealing with some anxiety, some anxiousness in your life right now, you're not alone. Doesn't mean there's something wrong with you or that you're unspiritual. It just means that we're in a really tough season right now. So how do we deal with it? How do we work with this anxiety, this anxiousness? How do we get through it? That's what I want to talk about this morning and find some help for you. There's different causes to anxiety. Some people deal with anxiety because it's a chemical imbalance. It's really nothing that they can control. It's their body responding in a certain way. Sometimes it's part of getting older, the aging process. We're not able as well to handle some of those stresses of life that we used to just kind of walk right through. It's different in this later season of life. And a lot of those things can be managed through medication, and I encourage that. Then there's general anxiety that everyone feels now and then. It's a normal emotion. The problem with anxiety is this, that when it begins to control our thoughts and affect us in negative ways, it becomes a problem. It can turn into a disorder if we don't deal with it. Now, we don't have to feel guilty because we struggle with some anxiety. It doesn't mean we're not spiritual. That doesn't help. That just increases the sense of anxiety. But I want you to know this, that God's heart for you and God's heart for me this morning is that we not be weighed down in our spirit, in our soul, with fear and anxiety. That's not his heart for us at all. He wants to help us through that. I love what is written in Philippians chapter 4, verses 6 to 7. Do not be anxious about anything. That's not a tone of correction or sternness, but it's a father's heart speaking to us through the Apostle Paul here. Do not be anxious about anything. I hope you can hear him saying that to you. But in every situation, we're in a situation right now, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. What a powerful promise and verse that God has given us, what he wants to do for us. I also love the verse in 1 Peter 5:7. Pour out all your worries and stress upon him and leave them there. I love that. Pour them out. Give them to God. Another translation says, cast your cares on him. Give them, and then leave them there after you prayed about it. Don't then continue to run these things through your mind. Let them there. You've given them to God. He's going to take care of those things for you. So leave them there, for he always tenderly cares for you. Anxiety is a huge issue among youth and young adults, more so than ever before. Before, there was a lot of depression and discouragement that youth and young adults would deal with. But right now, anxiety, and this is before this whole crisis that we've been in the last number of years, anxiety is much greater than depression and discouragement among young people. Young people just feel anxious about life for many different reasons. When our worry, what turns worry into anxiety is our inability to turn off the thoughts. That's when the worry, the natural things we worry about, when those things just keep running and running in our mind, now it turns into anxiety inside of us. And then we're not able to enjoy the other aspects of life because of this anxiety, this worry that just keeps going on and on in our heads. You may say things like, I can't get my thoughts to stop going round and round, or I wake up with a feeling of dread, and I don't know why. There's this feeling of dread is in my life. That's anxiety. Someone has said, worry works on your mind, but anxiety works on your body. There's a lot of physical things that begin to happen in our bodies when anxiety continues for a long period of time. I remember a time when I went into anxiety overload, and I started having all these physical symptoms in my body. I'd lay down at night, and my body was just all these weird feelings and tremors and things were going on, and it was scary. I didn't know what was going on. It was anxiety that I needed to deal with. I understand a little bit what it must feel like to have panic attacks. Anxiety, if you don't deal with it, can become debilitating in our lives. So let me share a few ideas with you on how to overcome feelings of anxiety. These are things that people who have dealt with serious anxiety have found helpful, as well as what counselors usually share with people that are struggling with anxiety. And the first one is very basic. In fact, all of them are pretty basic. We just need to do them and practice these in our lives. The first one is reading the Psalms is a great antidote for anxiety. Reading the Psalms. King David, who wrote most of the Psalms, struggled with a lot of raw emotions. He struggled with fear and doubt and anger and anxiety, and he expresses all of that in the Psalms. He just rolls it out. And it's one of the reasons why the Psalms connect so deeply with us, because we see ourselves, we see our emotions, we see our struggles in the Psalms as David worked through them for himself. You see, David had been a shepherd before he was a king. And David knew that a shepherd would do anything to both protect and to provide for his sheep. And so the psalm we all know so well, Psalm 23, let's just read it again from the perspective of someone that has just really been dealing with anxiety and fear. And then he thinks about God as a shepherd. Psalm 23, he says, the Lord is my shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. Reversing it, my shepherd is the Lord. I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me. My shepherd is with me. My shepherd is the Lord. He is with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The Psalms are good medicine for our soul. They really do help anxiety if you will stay and soak in the Psalms and let them minister to your spirit. You know, the Psalms were actually songs that they sang. Most of them were songs that they would sing as part of their worship. You know what that tells me? That tells me something that is really helpful that David had discovered was good, godly music ministers deep into your soul. That could actually be another point here. That turn on, play, soak in some good, godly music, soothing music. Music is helpful to your soul. Number two, people with anxiety have learned that it's important to talk to someone. Talk to someone. Hiding your anxiety doesn't help. Find a trusted friend to talk to. Hearing another perspective is so helpful. You know, sometimes with anxiety, our problem is our perspective. We've just lost perspective. We tend to imagine the worst, and we tend to exaggerate things in our minds. They become much bigger than what they really are. But for us, in the midst of anxiety, they feel very real. So we need somebody else to help our perspective. Talk to someone. That's what I did. When I had that overload with anxiety, I just found someone to talk to. And you know what? That was the key for me to get through it. I just needed to get my perspective back. And I'll say this, in trying to help someone else with anxiety, know that listening is often the best and most loving things you do. Don't try to fix them. They don't want you to fix them. They need someone to listen, someone to care, someone to pray with them. Number three, face your anxiety head on. This is so important. This is really powerful. Face your anxiety and fear head on. Anxiety draws its strength from the fear and the worry of the unknown, the what ifs, what's going to happen. And when you face your fears, when you face it head on, it begins to lose its power over you. Anxiety begins to go down. Anxiety, what it does is it causes us to live in the world of what if thinking. What if this happens? What if they do this? What if I have cancer? What if the shutdown goes for 2 more months? What if? And we just go on and on with the what ifs. I used to be a what if kind of person. My mind would always go to the worst scenario. And that's not a fun way to live. It's not a healthy way to live. The best thing to do is face it. And this is how you face it. So you're dealing with all these what ifs. So ask yourself, what if the what if happens? What if this thing I'm so fearful, I'm so concerned about, I'm so worried about, it's creating all this anxiety? What if it happens? Face it head on. What if it does? Is God going to leave you? Are the promises of God still true? That He's going to help you, He's going to sustain you, He will provide for you? Face it head on. It takes the power out of it. God will always make a way for you. He is faithful. He is committed to you. He's committed to your hope and your future. So break out of that what if self-talk. You know, how many things have you and I not done because of what if thinking? We were ready to take that step. We were ready to take a risk. We were ready to do something. And then the what ifs come up. And we allowed the what ifs just to shut us down. So turn the what if into what is. What is thinking? Focus on the now moment. What is now? What can you do today? What do you have right now in your hand? Think about the what is instead of the what ifs. And you will begin to move outside of anxiety. Focus on what you have control over, not what you don't. You don't have control over tomorrow. We don't have control over what the governor is going to do, or we don't have control over that. But what do you have control over right now? What is in your life? Focus on what you can do today and trust God with tomorrow. It also helps to reflect on how God has helped you in the past. That's why the scriptures talk so much about remember, and tell the next generation the faithfulness of God, because when we remember what he has done and who he is, we find strength to move outside of fear. So you overcome anxiety by changing your focus and your attitude. And you have the spirit of power to do that. You say, well, I can't. I'm just kind of locked into this. No, you have the spirit of power to do that. It's a lie to say you can't stop your thoughts and things like that. You can, because 2 Timothy 1:7, for God has not given us a spirit of fearfulness, but one of power, love, and sound judgment. God has given us the spirit of power to overcome wrong thinking and even wrong emotion. Usually the emotion follows the thinking, so we need to deal with the thinking part. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's a journey, but as you talk with people, you soak in the Psalms of the Scripture, pray, God will help you through that. Number 4, take every thought captive. Anxiety feeds on negative thinking. So we need to be mindful about our thought patterns. 2 Corinthians 10:5, we destroy arguments and every proud obstacle to the knowledge of God and take every thought captive to obey Christ. Take it captive. So the way I take my thoughts captive, I need to ask, what am I listening to? If I'm feeding on the media, and overfeeding on the media, it creates anxiety in all of us. So one way to take my thought captive at times is to turn off the TV. I just taken it captive. I have control over the remote. I can make those decisions. Isaiah 26:3, you will keep him in perfect peace. That means not anxiety. All who trust in you, and here's the key, thoughts are fixed on you. So again, we take captive our thoughts. Instead of fixing our thoughts on all the what ifs, can go wrong, what if this happens? Instead, I'm going to focus my thoughts on him, on who he is. And when I do that, there is a peace that God releases that comes into my life, into my thought life, and into my emotional being as well. So capture your thoughts, don't let them run wild. Number 5, do something you enjoy doing. This is the pressure release for anxiety and stress. Do something, go exercise, take a walk, hiking. Some people are putting puzzles together. To me, that's stressful. But try to do some things that you enjoy doing. I went out fly fishing this week. Didn't catch any fish, but hey, I released some of that pressure. I enjoyed it. Number 6, be still and know he is God. I'm going to end on this note. Be still and know he is God. These feelings of dread and desperation, this anxiety, as I begin to come into that place of being still, the stillness in my soul, we begin to experience this deep knowing of who he is. He says, if you will be still and you will learn to know who I am, your focus becomes on me and not your circumstances. You will begin to walk in a new level of freedom. Psalm 46, verse 10. Be still and know that I am God. In other words, I'm your father. I am the shepherd. I'm your protector. I'm your provider. I'm the faithful one. I'm God. Just be still. Still your thoughts and remember who I am. I'm your father. I'm your shepherd. I'm God. I love the translation from the Passion Translation of Psalm 46. Surrender your anxiety. Be silent. Stop your striving, and you will see that I am God. I am the God above all the nations, and I will be exalted through the whole earth. Here he stands, the commander, the mighty Lord of angel armies is on our side. The God of Jacob fights for us. Be still, and you'll see the angel armies. Be still, and you'll see the mighty warrior going ahead of you and making a way. Understanding the nature and the character of our God enables us to trust him on a deep level. So I would just say this. Stop all the what-if chatter. Stop all the frantic activity. And there's times even to stop the desperate pleading prayers. Sometimes we're just all this prayer, God help me. Sometimes we're just going to stop and say, be still or be quiet. Just stop. Listen. What's he saying? Wait. Wait on the King. Be still and know your God. And the God's Spirit will reveal the Lord of angel armies with you. We're going to sing that song as we close. The God of angel armies. We want to declare this reality through the song. And I just want to say this to the parents before we wrap up here. Be aware that our children also deal with anxiety. This is not just a youth or an adult issue. Our children do this. Right now they can't go to school. They can't see their friends. They hear anxious talk. Maybe some of the parents are not able to go to work. They hear talk about how are we going to pay the bills. They can't go to church. They hear about this disease. They see people going around with masks. It can be really fearful. It's confusing for children. So I encourage you as parents, talk about it with your children. It doesn't help not to talk about it. Talk about it and just ask, how are you doing? Do you have any questions? And you can assure them that we'll get through this. You can assure them that this, especially for children, that this disease is really not affecting children. Be there and just comfort them. And God's peace will cover them as well. So let's sing this song, God of Angel Armies. I just want us to have this image in our hearts as we go into this week. He is with us, and his armies are surrounding us through this pandemic. Let's declare this truth together.